This year's games took place in a temperate steppe. As the tributes glanced around the arena, they saw that they were in a grassy clearing. As one left the clearing, the grass got gradually higher until it reached the waist of the tallest tributes, which were Bellatrix from 2, Silico from 3, and Tide from 4. As the grass reached its highest point, the tributes would see large hills which they could climb, which would eventually lead to a freshwater lake. Inside the cornucopia, bottles of water, bowls of soup, large bags filled with unknown contents, knives, swords, spears, axes, tridents, and scythes could be found. As the countdown began, Narcissus from 2 turned to Bellatrix from 2 and grinned at her, jerking his head towards Alba from 5, who was a few podiums to his left. Alba looked over at them and stuck her tongue out at Bellatrix, who scoffed and stroked her blonde curls. Alba glanced at the cornucopia before setting her sights on a bottle of water and some soup. Atticus from 1 and Twiggy from 7 were on either side of Silico from 3, who towered over them. As Silico tensed himself and rolled his shoulders back, he noticed Eddie from 5 on a far-right podium, with Shell from 12 to his left. As Eddie noticed Silico looking at him, he smiled slightly, which made Silico grin and jerk his head towards the long grass, indicating that he wanted Eddie to flee. Meanwhile, Amber from 3 was on a far-left podium with Kane from 7 to her right. Amber glanced at Kane, who waved at her, which seemed to scare her, and she glanced at Gloria from 1, who was 8 podiums to her right. Gloria sneered at her before grinning in a sinister way. Amber glanced at Silico, who mouthed at her to run. The gong sounded and Amber left over the clearing and ran in the opposite direction away from the cornucopia as fast as she could. She sprinted as far as she could and did not look back, but heard a scream as Bellatrix threw a knife at the boy from 8, which made him fall to the ground. Amber zigzagged through the long grass and then dived to the ground before beginning to crawl. Silico leapt off of his podium and sprinted as fast as he could towards the cornucopia, with Bellatrix quickly chasing after him. Silico ran in and grabbed a spear before flipping over the table and running away, but he was suddenly pinned to the ground by Atticus, who was holding a sword. Silico slammed his elbow into Atticus's face, which caused him to leap backwards. Silico grabbed a spear and taunted Atticus with it, pretending to throw it at his heart and then pulling it back and laughing. Atticus punched Silico, and as he got to his feet, Silico jabbed a spear at him, which hit him in the stomach and caused him to yell out in anger. As Atticus dropped to the ground, a female figure fell towards Silico, and he was momentarily distracted as her blood splattered his face, and he staggered backwards in disgust, jabbing the spear at Atticus. Alba had immediately run towards the cornucopia, but tripped on a dying boy from 8, which caused her to hit her head on the table, but she ducked down in time just as Gloria fired an arrow at the girl from 9, which caused her to fall to the ground. Most of the other tributes reached the cornucopia and had already begun fighting over the weapons, and as Alba glanced up, she saw Orr from 12 quickly grabbing a sword, and he swiped it at various tributes. Alba got to her feet and rubbed her head in pain, before looking at various other tributes. She looked behind just as Orr threw his sword into the back of the girl from 10, who had been sneaking up on Alba. Orr swiped his sword at Alba, but she jumped to her feet and leapt backwards at the last second. As Orr's sword flew out of his hand, due to the force he had swiped it with, Alba shook her head and instead grabbed a knife that was on the table. The boy from District 10 was being stabbed by Narcissus with a spear towards Alba, and as she glanced around, she called Narcissus an obscene word and prepared to throw the knife at him. As she threw her arm back to release it, she suddenly screamed and coughed blood, before dropping to her knees and pitching forward with an arrow in her neck that had just been fired by Gloria. She fell towards Silico, splattering his face with blood. Eddie appeared hesitant about running in at all, and he glanced around in fear at the 6 couriers, who were already taking control of the cornucopia. He remained on his podium and glanced around, watching Alba fall to the ground at the hands of Gloria. Eddie shook his head and swore, before making a brave decision and running inwards, past Silico and Atticus, who were beginning to duel. Eddie ran past the dueling pair without looking back and immediately grabbed the closest weapon that was on the table, which turned out to be a spear. He grabbed it and jabbed it in the direction of Bellatrix, who was simultaneously strangling both tributes from District 11. As she grunted in frustration that the tributes were still alive, Eddie launched a spear at her. Unfortunately for Eddie, the spear missed Bellatrix by only 2 inches and instead impaled the girl from 11 in the stomach. As she screamed, Eddie whispered, "I'm sorry," before running to retrieve the spear. Bellatrix glanced at him, but as she was about to grab the spear, the still-alive boy from District 11 kicked her in the groin and she gasped, before she snapped his neck in anger, which gave Eddie enough time to grab the spear. Eddie smirked at his good luck and ran towards the inside of the cornucopia, grabbing a backpack that was hanging from the wall. Gloria saw this and fired an arrow at Eddie, but he blocked it with his backpack before putting it around his shoulder and running into the fields. Silico finally managed to overpower Atticus and knocked him to the ground, before beginning to punch him as hard as he could. However, the boy from District 1 managed to get to his feet and he kicked Silico, which caused him to stagger backwards. As Atticus tried to stab Silico with the sword, Silico swung out his spear, which blocked the sword. As it bounced off, Silico called Atticus an obscene word, calling him hard work, and plunging the spear into his heart. As Atticus fell to the ground and moved no more, Silico turned in the opposite direction and ran. Amber alternated between jogging and walking for more of the rest of the day, stopping to catch her breath before climbing the hills. She realized she did not have any water and decided to lie down for a bit. After sleeping for an hour, she woke up and swore as she saw that a coyote was slowly approaching her. She swore in a panic and got to her feet, before turning in the opposite direction and beginning to run. However, Amber failed to realize that this coyote was in fact more curious than bloodthirsty, and she stopped running. The coyote walked nearer and Amber slowly approached it, before stroking its yellow-brown fur. She glanced at it once more and it purred at her, which made her smile. She stroked it again before resting her head against the fur, saying she would name the coyote Phoenix. Meanwhile, Eddie did not stop running and appeared traumatized that his district partner Alba had just been killed in front of him, whilst viewers in Snow Square muttered that Alba had been one of the meanest ever tributes in the history of the Hunger Games. Eddie began climbing a hill. However, as he reached the top, he tumbled down and hit his head on the ground, which made him yell out in pain. Eddie slowly got to his feet and began climbing up the hill again. As he reached the top, he sat down and rested, observing the sky as he did so. In the distance, he saw Amber hugging Phoenix the coyote, but ignored this and instead glanced at the now-setting sun. He observed the backpack he had taken from the cornucopia and saw that it contained a metal bottle of water, some matches, a blanket, a net, a canister of soup, and a leather pouch. Eddie observed his supplies before smiling. He sipped a bit of the water before placing it back into the backpack. He examined the soup before eating a bit of it. After this was done, he looked at the net and then glanced around at his surroundings. Deciding that the net was useless, Eddie placed the matches inside the leather pouch and lay down on the ground, before placing the blanket on his body, despite it being rather hot. Meanwhile, Silico sprinted away from the cornucopia as quickly as he could without looking back. He only glanced around to see the remaining 5 career tributes sorting through the weapons in the cornucopia and muttering in anger about Atticus's death. He held the spear tightly and continued running through the long grass, hearing the roars of the careers behind him. Soon after, 8 cannons sounded and Silico stopped and looked behind at the cornucopia to see who had been killed. As he saw that Gloria, Narcissus, Bellatrix, Tyne, and Oceania from 4 were all alive, he swore, but then smiled, saying, "At least the one boy's gone." He continued running, and even as the sun set, he did not stop, except only to regain his breath. He remembered he did not have water, but heard splashes coming from the lake, and climbed up the nearest hill to see who was making these splashes. Due to the darkness, Silico could not see who was making the noise, but he saw a female figure drink some more water from the lake, before urinating behind a rock and sitting next to a coyote. He shook his head and walked towards the figure, before seeing that it was Amber. He gasped in joy as she smiled and let him sit next to her. They drank some more water, and with Amber stating that they would try to find some food tomorrow. At midnight, Horn of Plenty played, and the portraits of Atticus from 1, Alba from 5, the boy from 8, the girl from 9, both tributes from 10, and both tributes from 11 were shown, leaving the 16 tributes remaining. Eddie could be seen crying as Alba's portrait was shown, but he soon composed himself and went to sleep. The next morning, Eddie woke up and swore as he saw Gloria, Narcissus, Bellatrix, Tyne, and Oceania making their way towards him. The 5 couriers had spent the night hunting and were preparing to sleep, which luckily gave Eddie enough time to slowly crawl away. He stuffed his supplies in his backpack and prepared to leave. But just then Tide shouted that Mayor's boy was right in front of them. Eddie swore and grabbed his backpack, but as he started running, Tide threw a trident at him, which narrowly missed him. Eddie ducked and performed several backflips, sprinting down the hill as quickly as he could. Tide roared in anger, and as he threw his arm back to launch another trident, he suddenly coughed blood and fell to his knees before pitching forwards. Orr, who had been on the neighboring hill, had heard this commotion and had seized this opportunity to kill one of the couriers. As he climbed up the hill, he threw his sword with all the strength he could muster, which led it to fly into Tide's back. As he fell to the ground, Orr began a scrappy sword fight with Narcissus, whilst Shell leapt out from behind and smashed Bellatrix's face into the ground, which gave Eddie enough time to run. Narcissus pushed Orr to the ground and Bellatrix pushed Shell down the hill before running after Eddie with Gloria and Oceania and as Tide's cannon sounded. Eddie grabbed Tide's trident and continued running even though he was clearly exhausted. However, he appeared to remember his net, and he took it out of his bag before throwing it at Gloria. She spat in disgust as she fell, which gave Eddie more time to run. After about 10 minutes, he reached the long grass fields and soon tripped. As he lay on the ground, he squeezed his eyes shut, presumably giving up on surviving, but as Narcissus and Bellatrix neared him, he held the spear and trident at the ready and continued running. He crossed through the fields before running east, towards the hill where Silico and Amber had just been awoken by Tide's cannon. They glanced around before catching a glimpse of the 4 remaining couriers chasing Eddie. Silico turned to Amber and she shook her head, saying that his death would benefit and one can't save anyone in the Hunger Games. Silico nodded at her and smiled grimly, before watching Eddie desperately run in their direction. Silico turned to Amber and asked her what she thought Eddie was doing, but she replied that he had seen them and was hoping they would help him. Silico said they would have to help him as he was younger than them, but Amber argued that only one person could win these games. However, Silico immediately ran down the hill and grabbed Eddie, who yelled out. Silico shook his head before smiling at Eddie and running up the hill with a firm grip on Eddie's arm. Amber rolled her eyes when she saw Eddie, but he suddenly gasped at Phoenix the Coyote. Amber told him to act his age, and he frowned at her. Silico discreetly told Eddie that Amber was just having a bad day, but Amber heard this and playfully slapped Silico. The trio agreed to form an alliance and shared some of Eddie's water and soup. They soon exchanged stories about their lives back in their homes, and Silico and Eddie appeared to bond over the fact that they were both homosexual. As Amber spoke about how she had thrown her cheating boyfriend out of a window, both boys laughed as she stated that he had broken both of his arms and his left leg. As only 9 tributes were awake, not much more action took place until the early afternoon. This surprised Rubeus, as he said it is unusual for tributes to sleep for so many hours in the arena. Priscilla replied that they were probably just resting. But just then Rubeus was distracted by the screams of a female tribute, followed by a cannon. This cannon belonged to Walker from 6, who had been roaming the steppe with his district partner, Casey, when a thunderstorm broke out and he was struck by lightning. Casey continued screaming as rain poured over the steppe, which caused most tributes to place the hood of their jackets over their head. Silico asked if they needed to run, but Amber cuddled the Phoenix the Coyote and told Silico and Eddie that there was no need for them to run. However, the rainfall suddenly started to intensify and the water soaked through their hoods. Silico shouted that the steppe did not have any trees to hide under, and Amber swore, before gasping in delight as she pointed ahead. As Silico and Eddie turned around, they saw that there was a burrow in a nearby hill that had been designed by game maker Friend to give the tribute some shelter. They ran towards the hill and sat in the burrow, which had just enough space to fit the 3 tributes and Phoenix the Coyote inside. The rain continued and the day wore on, with the 3 members of the Alliance and their coyote clearly in a very awkward position. Amber snapped at Silico for touching her shirt, but he shouted that this was an accident. As the sun slowly set and the rain continued, lightning began striking the steppe and several shrieks from tributes could be heard, but surprisingly nobody died from the lightning. Silico, Amber, and Eddie did not appear to enjoy this arrangement, and the tributes from 3 continued arguing. However, their attention was diverted as Horn of Plenty played and the portraits of Tide from 4 and Walker from 6 were shown, leaving this Gloria from 1, Narcissus and Bellatrix both from 2, Silico and Amber both from 3, Oceania from 4, Eddie from 5, Casey from 6, Kane and Twiggy both from 7, Flossie from 8, Grist from 9, and Orr and Shell, both from 12, remaining. The 14 remaining tributes did not enjoy the rain, and Flossie and Grist could be seen shivering, due to them being the youngest in this year's lineup. Eddie and Silica woke early during the later hours of the morning of the third day. They glanced at each other before simultaneously cocking their heads at Amber. As he glanced at her one more time, Silica replied that he liked Eddie. Eddie shrugged, saying he liked him too, but Silica glanced around and whispered, "No, kid, I really like you." Eddie gasped as Silica laughed before putting a hand on his hip and asking Silica how he was already crushing on him, despite barely even knowing him. Silica mockingly ticked off his fingers as he told Eddie that he knew he was the son of Mayor Greengrass, that he was 15 years old, and that he was from District 5. Eddie rolled his eyes before saying that he knew Silica was 17 years old, from District 3, and the son of a now-deceased District 3 tribute. Silica laughed and asked Eddie where he had learned that. Eddie said that after the assessment of tributes, his mentor Lynette Laurier had given him a notebook with as many facts about the other tributes as Lynette knew. Silica asked Eddie to share some of these facts, and Eddie told him that so far, Narcissus, Bellatrix, Kane, Orr, and Shell were the strongest threats to them in this year's lineup. Silica appeared to agree, before muttering about how much he hated Narcissus and Bellatrix, as they were related to Linus Dalton, the now-deceased tribute responsible for his mother's death. He soon began a rant about how Narcissus even looked like Linus, insulting his shaved head and calling the Daltons a string of obscene words, some of which were so shocking that Rubius even fell out of his seat while glaring at the screen, muttering that Silica would meet with an unfortunate accident if he did not shut up and behave. Silica asked Eddie if he wanted to have some fun, which made Eddie laugh and say that he did not know how to become intimate with a boy. Silica simply said that his former boyfriend had given him numerous tips about intimacy. He took his shirt off, before asking Eddie to rest his head against his chest. Eddie rolled his eyes as he did so, but suddenly gasped in admiration and smiled at Silica. The pair continued this unusual form of intimacy until Amber woke up. Silica immediately pulled his shirt down and awkwardly smiled at Amber. Eddie also gave an awkward smile, which made Amber scowl. She then grabbed Phoenix the Coyote and told Silica and Eddie that they needed to find a new resting spot for the rest of the day. Silica replied that this was unnecessary, but Amber turned away and began walking towards the perimeter. Silica and Eddie rolled their eyes before following Amber and Phoenix the Coyote. After 10 minutes, they decided to rest as noon came, but just an announcement from Game Maker Friend came on. Game Maker Friend announced that a virus would be released into the arena in 20 minutes, and the only way to survive was to get an immunity pill from the cornucopia. Silica swore and told Amber that they were now 10 minutes further from the cornucopia than they had previously been. However, Amber had jumped on Phoenix's back and she pointed at the cornucopia in the distance, which made the coyote begin running towards the cornucopia. Silica and Eddie called Amber obscene words before they glanced at each other in anger and began running towards the cornucopia. They held their spears as they ran and reached the cornucopia in 17 minutes, running as fast as they could. Amber was the first to reach the cornucopia, riding on Phoenix the Coyote, and she sprinted inwards and grabbed a pill, before turning and running, narrowly avoiding the career back, who arrived seconds later to grab their pills. Kane and Twiggy ran as the career swallowed their pills, but just as Twiggy turned to run, a sword flew horizontally into her hand, cutting it off. Twiggy screamed in agony and shouted for Kane to help her, but just as he was running to help her up, Orr jumped on his back and pushed him to the ground. Kane and Twiggy had allegedly made fun of Orr during training after he dropped a weight on his toe, but this appeared to be his attempt at revenge. Orr retrieved a sword from the ground and told Shell she could enter. She tossed a pill at Orr and he quickly swallowed it, while Shell swallowed her own pill. Twiggy continued screaming in agony and this distracted Orr, who told her to shut up and brought his sword down into her heart, which caused her to yell out and sounded her cannon seconds later. However, Twiggy's screams had caused the 12s to not notice Silica and Eddie run in. Shell realized the dome timer was passing 7 seconds when she realized Kane had swallowed the pill. So she grabbed at Orr's sword and slit Kane's throat, which sounded as cannon moments later. Silica and Eddie quickly grabbed their pills before turning and running just as Flossie ran in and grabbed her pill at the last second. Screams were heard as Casey and Grist, who had not made it, fall to the ground paralyzed as the virus was released into the arena. These two tributes had been only a meter from the cornucopia, which made Orr and Shell laugh. But they quickly walked towards the two paralyzed tributes and Orr killed them with his sword, which consecutively sounded their cannons. Amber ran as fast as she could before spending the rest of the afternoon near the lake. As night slowly fell, she decided to swim, narrowly avoiding the careers, who were singing and dancing nearby. Amber muttered, "Cringe," and sat back down with her coyote. She rode on him for a bit, before beginning to sleep as night fell. Silico and Eddie stopped to catch their breath after a few minutes, and Silico muttered that the District 12 tributes were practically career disures. Eddie muttered that he would have liked to know Orr out of the arena, as he was very good-looking and muscular. Silico laughed and stroked his hair, saying, "Am I not handsome enough for you?" Eddie rolled his eyes and said, "You're too tall for my taste." Silico gasped theatrically and he smirked, before patting Eddie on the back. They walked slowly with their spears as Eddie realized that he had left his backpack at their old camp. They ran back to their old camp and grabbed his backpack, but then soon turned around and found a playful coyote staring at them. Eddie and Silico agreed to name him Bear and they petted him. Soon a sponsor gift floated down to them, which turned out to be some sandwiches. The boys each ate one of the sandwiches, savoring the delicious ham, cheese, and herbs. At midnight, Horn of Plenty played and the portraits of Casey from 6, Kane and Twiggy, both from 7, and Grist from 9 were shown, leaving just 10 tributes remaining. These 10 were Gloria from 1, Narcissus and Bellatrix, both from 2, Silico and Amber, both from 3, Oceania from 4, Eddie from 5, Flossie from 8, and Orange Shell, both from 12. The tributes slept well during the night and all awoke rather late on the morning of the 4th day. Silico took over the night watch from Eddie, giving the younger boy some time to sleep. Meanwhile, Amber and Phoenix the Coyote rode across the arena, presumably forgetting that they were currently in a fight to the death. Silico, Eddie, and Bear made their way around the arena and the boys took turns riding Bear. They crossed past the lake, and as they drank some water from the lake and childishly played in the lake, they heard a shriek followed by footsteps. They glanced up and readied their spears as they saw the 4 couriers chasing a wailing Flossie. They quickly surrounded her and Bellatrix mocked her screams, saying, "Looks like we have you surrounded," and stabbing her in the head with her knife, which sounded her cannon as she crumpled to the ground. As her body was collected by the hovercraft, Eddie and Silico nodded at each other before roaring and throwing their spears. Gloria spun around and her cannon sounded as Eddie's spear hit her in the heart. As she crumpled, Silico's spear flew over Narcissus's head, which alerted him, Bellatrix, and Oceania. They swore in a panic and held their respective sword, knife, and trident at the ready. Silico ran forwards and grabbed his spear, before brandishing it at Narcissus and Bellatrix. Silico roared at the sight of Narcissus and ran forward, before ramming into him. This caused both of them to roll down the hill and they came to a painful stop at the bottom. Narcissus hit his head on a rock, but was only knocked unconscious. Silico shouted at Eddie that they needed to run and get out of there. Eddie nodded before running towards Silico, dodging Oceania's trident. They fled through the hills and soon encountered Amber. Silico shouted that she had abandoned them, but she appeared to be more interested in trying to start a friendship between Phoenix the Coyote and Bear the Coyote than her angry district partner, which annoyed both Silico and Eddie. Without looking up, Amber stated that alliances did not last forever, before ramming into Eddie and tackling him to the ground. Eddie gasped in surprise as Amber began strangling Silico, who was gasping for air. Eddie leapt on top of Amber and punched her in the face as hard as he could, which caused her to fall on top of Silico. He kicked her in the groin and she cried out before dropping to the ground in pain. Silico kicked her in the face and turned to run, grabbing Eddie. They continued running before resting on top of a hill. They did not move for the rest of the day, and nor did Amber. She appeared annoyed that she had not managed to kill Silico, but soon glanced up as Horn of Plenty played and the portraits of Gloria from 1 and Flossie from 8 were shown, leaving just 8 tributes remaining. These 8 were Narcissus and Bellatrix, both from 2, Silico and Amber, both from 3, Oceania from 4, Eddie from 5, and Orange Shell, both from 12. As the morning of the 5th day came, Silico noticed a camera that had been meant to be hidden in a hill. He appeared to be focusing, but then laughed and walked towards the hill with his spear. He slammed it into the hole the camera was hidden in, before yanking the camera out and gasping in admiration. He opened the back of the camera and reattached several wires. Not really aware of what was happening, viewers in Snow Square were tragic and confusing. Suddenly, however, a sponsor gift appeared for Silico. He grabbed it before opening it to reveal a tablet. He quickly awoke Eddie, and the confused boy woke up and yawned. Silico attached a wire of the camera to the tablet, which caused numerous symbols to flash on the screen. As Eddie asked Silico what was happening, he tapped something into a box which flashed onto the screen before turning the tablet towards the screen. Eddie swore in admiration and gawked at Silico, who announced to the cameras that he had managed to hack into the tablet account of a game maker and could now control trackers. Viewers in Snow Square cheered on Silico's intelligence, and President Rickles Snow appeared on screen and announced that he gave Silico and Eddie permission to do what they had to do with their intelligence. Giff and Lynette spent sponsor gifts to the pair, with notes announcing President Snow's considerate assent for the pair to use this tablet to their advantage. As they glanced at each other in anticipation, Game Maker Friend announced that a feast would take place in exactly 5 minutes and the tributes would have something they desperately needed waiting for them. Silico and Eddie glanced at each other before nodding and leaping on Bear's back, asking him to run to the cornucopia. Amber appeared to be having nightmares during the night and whimpered repeatedly in her sleep. She continued sleeping around the time Silico woke up, but thankfully for her, Phoenix the Coyote trotted at her and woke her up. Amber shouted at Phoenix and told him not to do that ever again. Phoenix lowered his gaze as if to say, "I'm sorry," which appeared to upset Amber, and she smiled, before continuing to stroke him. After a sponsor gift delivered some bread for her, she quickly ate it and dusted herself off, before urinating behind a rock and shouting at Phoenix not to come over to her side. After pulling her pants back on, Amber heard Game Maker Friend's announcement before grabbing Phoenix and asking him to ride to the cornucopia with her on his back. Due to Bear's speed, Silico and Eddie were the second pair of tributes to arrive in the cornucopia. Narcissus and Bellatrix were already inside, but just as Narcissus grabbed the District 2 bag, Silico threw his spear. It struck Narcissus in the back and its cannon sounded the exact second the spear impaled him. He fell sideways to the ground and Bellatrix cried out, throwing herself over her cousin's body. Silico ran inside and grabbed the bags for Districts 3 and 5 and fled just as Orr and Shell arrived, and Orr started a duel with Oceania while Shell grabbed the feast bags for District 12. Silico turned to run but then encountered a running Amber. Eddie chose to run in at this moment and he tackled Amber to the ground, shouting that she was a traitor and did not deserve Silico's mercy. Amber got to her feet and slapped Eddie before kicking him in the chest with her left leg, which caused him to fall to the ground in pain. As he gasped for breath, Eddie shouted out, but Silico ignored him and began fighting with Amber. Amber was slightly more muscular than Silico, but he towered over her in height. Realizing her mistake, she walked backwards slightly and held her hands up in defense and in an attempt at peace, but Silico picked her up and threw her onto the ground. Amber begged for mercy as Silico snarled at her, shouting that she had betrayed him. As he was about to stab her with the sword he had retrieved after killing Narcissus, however, he heard a cannon and dropped the spear. The cannon belonged to Oceania after Orr had decapitated her with her sword. As Orr nodded at Shell, they turned and ran, with Bellatrix grabbing District 2's feast bags and chasing after them as fast as she could. Amber continued begging for mercy as Silico glared at her, before asking Eddie what he wanted to do with Amber. Eddie glanced at Silico and then at Amber, who told him she had siblings back home. Eddie glanced at a stone-faced Silico before sobbing and turning away. He shouted that he had never wanted to have to make such a decision at a young age, asking Silico to just do it if he wanted to. Silico smiled sadly at Amber, who nodded in acceptance as Silico threw his spear into her head, which sounded her cannon. Silico followed Eddie and handed him his feast bag. He opened it to see some body armor and a dagger, while Silico also received a dagger and some marble blocks. Silico asked Eddie what had happened, but Eddie replied that he did not want to kill Amber, before pointing at a wailing Phoenix the Coyote. Silico jerked his head at Bear, and he and Eddie climbed onto the Coyote. They rode for the rest of the day with no specific intention, and Silico asked Eddie what he wished to do with the tablet they had. Eddie told Silico to wait for later, but just then Horn of Plenty played and the portraits of Narcissus from 2, Amber from 3, and Oceania from 4 were left, leaving just 5 tributes remaining. These 5 were Bellatrix from 2, Silico from 3, Eddie from 5, and Orange Shell, both from 12. The next morning, all of the tributes awoke to the sound of a snarl. They turned around to see coyotes glaring at them, and Silico and Eddie saw that Bear was acting more violent now. Before they could even say anything, Bear gave chase and the pair sprinted towards the cornucopia. After making it towards the clearing, Silico kissed Eddie and told him that if they did not win, he wanted Eddie to know that he was a fun boy and would have been a great boyfriend. Eddie grinned at Silico and scoffed as they leaped into the clearing and ran into the structure, holding their spears and daggers at the ready. Eddie wore his body armor as Silico held his metal blocks, but just then a cannon went off. The cannon belonged to Orr after Shell had killed him with his own sword while they were running from the coyotes. Shell ran into the clearing seconds later, but Bellatrix charged inwards and threw a knife at Shell, which caused her to pitch forward as her cannon sounded. Bellatrix glanced at Silico and Eddie, who were brandishing their weapons at her. Bellatrix simply smirked and scoffed, before walking towards them and throwing her knife at Silico's neck, which caused him to collapse to the ground. Silico slowly placed a hand on the tablet as Eddie groaned in anger and misery as he cried out and called Bellatrix an obscene word. He grabbed the tablet and tapped on Bellatrix's name. Her look of confusion turned into that of horror and agony as her tracker blew up and her arm went spinning off. It landed near Eddie as Bellatrix screamed in agony and dropped to the ground in pain. Eddie glared at her before shouting that it was not fair she had just robbed Silico of his life. Bellatrix shouted that she just wanted to survive, before continuing to cry as she glanced at the blood rapidly spreading around her. Eddie took some of Silico's marble blocks and smacked Bellatrix on the head with one of them repeatedly, but being a Dalton, this did not kill her. Eddie then grabbed his spear and plunged it into Bellatrix's back, which sounded her cannon moments later. Eddie walked towards the dying Silico and held his hand as his cannon sounded. Eddie Greengrass of District 5 was announced to be the victor of the 104th Hunger Games, and Eddie began sobbing. He repeatedly shouted, "Why?" at the top of his lungs, and he refused to get up. So the Deathclaw had to be used to carry him out of the arena, with Eddie still shouting, "Why?" at the top of his lungs. President Snow was so impressed by his young victor that he cancelled the victor's interview and instead asked to have dinner with Eddie in his limousine. Eddie appeared annoyed despite dining with our wonderful president, but he appeared to enjoy the delicious food that was served. Eddie and President Snow spoke about his time in the arena, with the president saying that Eddie had certainly impressed the capital with his relationship with Silico and his killing of Bellatrix. Eddie appeared upset about Silico's death, but President Snow reminded him that Silico would have wanted to win. Eddie shrugged, before telling the president that the reason he had waited to use the tablet for later was that if he had used it to kill all of the tributes, he would have had to fight. He would have had to have the final fight with Silico, which was what he did not want. He told the president he wished he had never been reaped in the first place, but the president simply responded by turning on the limousine's television to reveal Eddie's family cheering out and crying tears of joy at his victory. Eddie and the president spent a few minutes chatting with Hertz, Mayor Greengrass, and Eddie's older brother Freddie. After this was done, they played a game of cards and exchanged ideas about what the quell twist for the 105th Hunger Games and next year could potentially be. When the limousine pulled up at President Snow's mansion, he spent some time in the car with Eddie and they discussed unknown topics. Before Eddie replied that he was excited to return to District 5 and finish his studies before becoming an astronomer, President Snow replied, "Ambition, ambition," and laughed as he left the limousine and walked over to Eddie's side to open the door for him. As Eddie got up and thanked President Snow, however, a gunshot rang out. Eddie screamed as President Snow dropped to his knees with blood spreading from his back. He reached out a hand from Eddie, who helped him up. President Snow gasped and asked for some water, but just then 3 more gunshots rang out and the president collapsed once more. Eddie spun around to see Maxima Liu, victor of the 79th Hunger Games, holding a gun and pointing it at Eddie. Peacekeepers were utterly unprepared and were drawing their weapons, but without a second thought, Eddie charged at Maxima and ran into her. They both fell to the ground as Eddie began wrestling with a much more experienced 53-year-old former victor, who was much stronger than him. He kicked her as hard as he could while peacekeepers shouted that they could handle Maxima. Eddie appeared too angry to hear this and slammed her head into the road repeatedly whilst she struggled. He continued smashing her head until she finally stopped moving, and Eddie was congratulated by the peacekeepers, but he soon began wailing at President Snow's body. Our darling president's funeral was broadcasted live on Pan Am the next night, with Eddie walking down Icarus Dalton, the cousin-in-law of President Snow, Isla Vale, and Azora Asimov as his body was pushed down the aisle in a casket. Maxima Liu had been part of terrorist organization Unidad since the ending of the 98 Hunger Games, when she had organized the assassination of her own mentee Alicia Heat. During the 99 Games, she had caused the death of her mentor Ennius Dalton by organizing his murder with Ariadne Fling. She was now dead, however, and thankfully, her family in District 2, including her husband Gladius Wren, were all executed following her killing of Rickles Snow. The elections for the new president of Pan Am took place the next week. Eventually, it was decided that a 36-year-old man named Smolder Flickerman would be the new president of Pan Am, having won 91% of the votes. Smolder Flickerman was a muscular man who was a talented gourmet chef, but had always been interested in politics. After graduating, Smolder Flickerman had joined the Capital Navy and had narrowly avoided being killed whilst defending Zone K from European powers back in 112. Smolder Flickerman announced after being sworn in that President Snow's murder had been cowardly, but Pan Am would rise once more. Meanwhile, Eddie became a hero in the capital for killing the treacherous Maxima Liu. However, he returned to District 5 before starting a relationship with Dean Logan, a cousin of Gravito and Flux Logan. He eventually got married to Dean and adopted several children before he graduated from the Capital University and became an astronomical engineer designing capital radar systems. Later that year, President Smolder Flickerman started a political alliance with Prince Yasin Shafiq of the Indian dynasty, the Mongolian Khan, and Prime Minister Andrew Nevin of Australia. A few weeks after this alliance was formed, Panamanian, Indian, Mongolian, and Australian forces attacked the land of Cuba, which was in what had once been South America. The campaign succeeded and the country was captured. President Flickerman decided that this country would be named District 14. He stated that it would be named District 14 as they had already lost District 13 and the former District 14 to Europeans, and so naming Cuba District 15 would show signs of weakness. The district would become the center of mutation development for the capital, containing many farms that would hold unused mutations. Zoos and aquariums were also opened in this district, with President Flickerman stating that the 105th Games, which occurred the next year, would be unforgettable. Okay guys, so thank you for watching this video. Don't leave yet because I have a Q&A. If you look at your screen, you'll see that I made a chart with all the victors of Hunger Games Chronicles so far. So for 101 we have 18-year-old Icarus Dalton of District 2. For 102 we have 17-year-old Isla Vale of District 4. For 103 we have a 16-year-old Azora Asimov of District 1. And for this games 104 we have 15-year-old Eddie Greengrass of District 5. Now everyone, it's Q&A time. Okay, so do you plan to expand on your existence of the Asian dynasties? Well, yeah, because I chose to make the Asian dynasties because I felt that the Asian countries didn't get much representation, so I decided to make them. And yeah, I think I'll expand on their existence. Are the Asian dynasties ruled by kings and queens? Well, honestly, like Pan Am, I guess so, but in this video, Prince Shafiq ordered the attack on Cuba, so I'll say it depends, really. Like, it's either the kings, the queens, the prince, or the princesses. What are your pronouns? He, him. Who is your favorite victor from Christian Blanco's series? Well, Sheaf, the way he just killed Panatena because she was the most arrogant person I've ever met. I guess you could say, I don't really know, maybe Selena, I don't know, let's see, I can't say I liked Atomica's games. I mean, I can't say I liked Atomica as a winner, but I liked Atomica's games with the Janus guy. I still don't understand why people say he tortured them, because I rewatched that video like 5 times, and I never heard anything about him pouring electricity into his body whatsoever. Oh yeah, Idaho. Nobody competes with Idaho. Do I watch Pan Am Reborn, Tales of Pan Am, or Robos after 100? Yes. I think of those channels as mentor texts. That's why I took a long. and I try to make my videos as good as them. Why did I decide to make my own channel? Because you guys will never believe this, but first I was like, when Christian was posting like 95th games, I was like trying to make my own series. Like I was starting with the first games and going up, but I decided that it was too hard. I've been writing so much, like since the Reclamation games, I kept writing my own fanfictions. It never worked. So when he finished 100, I decided maybe I can use his story as like the building blocks of my new channel. So that's why I made my channel. What do you use to make your videos? Honestly, I just screen record. I don't have Windows Movie Maker or anything. I just screen record. Do you regret killing off any tributes? I thought I wouldn't have done that because I've only written 4 games. But yes, I regret killing 4. He would have made a fun victor and he's not as sadistic as Casco. You have a really good channel. Thank you. Have you written any games in advance? Well, I don't know how long I'll continue my series. I wish to get it to 150, but no. I mean, I've written up till 132 in advance, but it's not like after 105, the games are like the short ones Christian started with. 150 is going to be big. But guys, I don't hold any hope. I mean, don't get so certain that I'm going to be making these videos because it's really, because I don't know, like I have worksheets. I have mountains and mountains and mountains and kingdoms of worksheets, and I don't know where I'll get the time. But I promise, if I can, I will. Who are we rooting for in the 100 Hunger Games? Let's see. I had so many. Optimo, Dazzle, Lumo, Glitch, Baffin. I wanted Gravito to win, but just so Flux's sacrifice wouldn't be in vain. Like, Gravito died, so that means Flux died for nothing. Oregon and Yukon. Oregon was my favorite. I was listening to the games on the bus, and then I screamed so hard when Oregon died. I was like so sad. Yes, Win and Olive. I liked Win's relationship with Ivy. Net was fun. Drin for the win! I was so angry when Drin died. I was like, what the heck? And then I love Tebow in Begonia. And I'm still so angry that Tebow killed himself. That's why I wrote an alternate ending in Reddit. And you can check it out. My username is suspiciousterm787. What is my favorite district? Mainly District 1, I guess, because their tributes are our careers, but not as arrogant as District 2. What do I think of the Dalton dynasty? I don't understand why so many people hate NES. I mean, if 2 grown women who have already won games, who have already killed tributes, are charging towards you, aren't you going to defend yourself and throw knives? I mean, yeah, I guess. NES is just a District 2 normal guy. Normal District 2. Yeah. I don't think he deserved death because that wouldn't have changed anything. Because if he died, how would that help the rebels or anything? Because NES was a capital loyalist, but he was the head of training and a commentator. He was not like the president or a general. Yeah. I also felt so bad when he died because I heard he had children, and that's why my 101st victor was Icarus Dalton. Who is your least favorite victor from Tales of the Hunger Games? It's really a hard, tough decision to make, but I felt that I love Ava. She's a really good person, but I felt that the 81st game should have been a District 3 and 6 POV with Charleston as the victor. Because it was fun. Mirai's games, I was so upset when Kyan died because he was so funny. And then I was like, the nerve of Mirai. After she did nothing to protect him when he died, and she has a nerve to start a relationship with his little sister. Bruh. I also liked Quartz a little more than Dollar, but I didn't mind that. I didn't mind. Casco's a really fun victor. Let's see. I'm still thinking. Alicia, I hate her. She killed Dougal. Literally, Dougal died because he wasn't looking. What is that, Christian? What are you trying to signify? Rubius, he killed Chintz. That was so upsetting when he just killed Chintz. I got angry. I get angry really quickly. So that's it, really. And what are some of your other interests besides writing? I like cooking. I'm a really good cook. I like swimming. I play sports right now. I'm learning how to juggle. I'm learning German on Duolingo. I like learning new things because it's fun. So, thanks for tuning into the 104th Hunger Games. I didn't feel that it was the best games I've written. I didn't feel it was the best. I didn't feel it was the best because, I don't know, Isn't it a coincidence that Tales of Panem also disliked his 104th Hunger Games? I'm just saying it's a coincidence. The 105th Hunger Games, I have an excellent quell idea. I've already begun writing it, but it'll be out in about a month. Thank you so much for tuning into Hunger Games Chronicles, and you will never know how much I appreciate it. Thank you.